In a quiet desert town, a struggling single dad buys a meal for a starving boy and saves him from dangerous situation, unaware about his background or his mother who's a tech billionaire. A few months later, that one act of kindness leads to an unexpected reunion, a heartfelt letter, and a new beginning that turns a dusty diner booth into something far greater. Let us begin the story. The desert wasn't quiet, it just knew how to keep its secrets. Wind whispered low through the cracked earth of Coyote Ridge, lifting tiny ribbons of dust that spun like forgotten memories before settling again into silence. Heat pressed down like a heavy hand, curling off the road in waves that blurred the horizon. In the middle of that wide, sun-beaten stillness sat a rust-colored diner, its windows streaked with sand, its neon sign flickering between diner and NER. Inside, the air buzzed with the faint hum of an old ceiling fan, the sizzle of bacon on the griddle, and the scratch of pencil on paper. Sophie, age 9, sat in the corner booth with a stack of schoolwork and a jar of pickled eggs she had decided would be her science project. Her shoes dangled above the tile floor, scuffed from desert gravel. Every so often, she looked up from her notebook to the counter where her father moved. Slow, steady, practiced. Ethan wore weariness like a well-worn jacket. The sleeves had frayed years ago, but he hadn't the time or heart to take it off. In his early 40s, with hands made rough from dish soap and desert wind, he poured coffee with the precision of a man who needed life to keep moving, one cup at a time. Behind the counter, the manager, Reed, counted bills for the lunch rush that never really came. Tourists didn't bother with towns like this anymore. They flew over them, left them to peel in the sun. At 11:47 a.m., the door creaked open. It wasn't unusual for someone to stumble in looking for shade. But this boy looked like a shadow that had walked too long in the light. His clothes were stiff with dirt, shoes barely held together with frayed laces, and his face, thin, sunburned, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Maybe 13, maybe younger. It was hard to tell beneath the hunger. He stood in the doorway a second too long, blinking as if the cool air were shocked to his bones. Then he moved toward the counter, slow, like someone walking through a dream. "Water," he said, voice cracking. Reed didn't look up. "You buying or begging?" The boy hesitated. "Please." "Then it's begging." Reed nodded toward the door. "Move along." Sophie looked up from her notebook. Ethan put down the coffee pot. There was no drama in his movement. No lecture. He walked to the register, pulled a few bills from his apron, and laid them down without a word. He grabbed a plate and filled it eggs, toast, a slice of peach from the back fridge, and poured a tall glass of water. Then he set it on the counter beside the boy and said quietly, "Table by the windows got the best view." The boy stared at the food like he was afraid it might vanish. He didn't say thank you, didn't smile, just picked up the plate and shuffled to the window, where Sophie had already pushed her books aside to make room. "You can sit," she said simply. He sat. Outside, heat waves danced on the pavement. A fly buzzed near the pie case. The boy took one bite, then another, and then, like a dam breaking, shoveled food in so fast Ethan had to step over and remind him to sip his water before he choked. The boy didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Sophie. She simply offered him one of her pencils and drew a desert lizard on a napkin. When he looked up at her, something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite a tear, just something real. Ethan wiped the counter, watching them from the corner of his eye. He didn't ask questions. You learn not to in places like this. By 2 p.m., the diner was empty. Reed retreated to the office, muttering about freeloaders. Ethan brought the boy a glass of lemonade and sat down at the edge of the booth. "You got a name?" he asked. The boy hesitated, then soft as wind through brush. "Liam." Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan." "That's Sophie." Sophie grinned. "Hi." Liam looked like he wasn't used to his name anymore, like it hadn't been said kindly in a long while. "You from around here?" Ethan asked. Liam shook his head. "You headed somewhere?" Shrug. Ethan didn't press, just reached into his pocket and handed Liam a wrapped peanut butter bar. "For later." Liam took it slowly, fingers trembling. Sophie noticed the bruises on his wrists, half-moon rings, like something had been cinched too tight. She didn't say anything, just passed him her drawing of the lizard, and this time he did smile. By sundown, Reed had locked the cash drawer and left. The boy remained, tucked into the booth, unsure if he was welcome or just forgotten. Ethan stepped out from the kitchen, drying his hands. Couch in the back room's clean. Got an old blanket, too. Liam blinked, as if the offer didn't make sense. You don't have to tell me anything, Ethan added. Just rest. That's all. Liam stood, hesitant. He followed Ethan to the back, past the fridge, past the mop bucket, past the life Ethan had never expected to live. Sophie walked behind them, holding a small jar with a lightning bug she'd caught outside. You can keep him, she whispered, for company. The boy stared at the tiny glow pulsing in the jar. His throat moved, trying to form words, but none came. The couch sagged, but was soft enough. Ethan set a pillow down and left the door open a crack. I'll be out front. Liam sat, holding the jar in both hands. That night, after Sophie fell asleep in her makeshift cot behind the counter, Ethan found himself at the front window, watching stars form above the dark outline of the hills. His wife used to love the stars, said they looked like prayers someone had whispered long ago. A creak came from the hallway. Liam, barefoot, stood there holding a flip phone with a cracked screen. I need to make a call, he said. Just one. Ethan nodded, stepped aside. The boy walked to the far end of the diner, away from the lights, crouched by the payphone that hadn't worked in years, and used the cell instead. He spoke in hushed tones. It's me. I'm safe. No, don't send anyone. Please. I'll find a way. Then silence. When he returned, he tucked the phone deep in his pocket and climbed back onto the couch, curling up without another word. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. Something about the boy's voice, the way it cracked not from fear, but from holding too much in, kept echoing. The next morning, Liam was up early. He helped Sophie arrange chairs, wiped the counter without being asked, refused food, then accepted toast only after Sophie made it herself and called it officially unburnt. Ethan noticed how Liam jumped every time a car passed, how his eyes followed every stranger that walked in like a hunted thing. And when two black SUVs drove past the diner without stopping, Liam dropped a glass, then froze. It wasn't just fear, it was memory. Something had happened to this boy, something that chased him, even in daylight. That afternoon, Sophie offered Liam a pencil and a blank page. Draw whatever you want, she said. He drew a house, small, desert flowers in front, a figure standing on the porch, waiting. Is that someone you miss? She asked gently. Liam nodded. Ethan sat down beside them, one arm around Sophie. You're safe here, he said, for as long as you need. Liam looked at them both, this man with tired eyes and rough hands, this girl who gave lightning bugs and called burnt toast a masterpiece. His own hands were still trembling. He whispered, thank you. It was the first real thing he'd said since he arrived. Later, after they cleaned up and the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan wrote something on the back of a receipt and slipped it into the register drawer. It simply read, if someone's starving, feed them. That's the rule. He didn't tell anyone he wrote it. He didn't need to. Outside, the desert cooled into night. The stars blinked awake again, as if in quiet applause. And inside the diner, for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel lonely. The desert changed color before a storm, not like the sky, but like the ground remembered something old and terrible. It was subtle at first, a strange stillness in the air, the way the birds quieted, the way the light pressed down, not with heat, but with weight. Ethan stood outside the diner with a wrench in one hand, fixing the sagging hinge on the front door. It was early afternoon, but the sun had already taken a bitter tone, dull and heavy. He looked to the horizon. Amber dust curled at the edges like smoke from a distant fire. Inside, Liam was drying silverware with Sophie, the two of them making a game of it. Guess the state on the back of the old quarter under each napkin. Nevada, Texas, New Mexico. Sophie kept score with a tally drawn in mustard on a napkin. The diner hadn't had a real sandstorm in weeks, but storms, Ethan knew, came when you weren't ready. Same as loss, same as miracles. He called softly through the door. Sophie, Liam, inside. Now. Liam didn't ask why. He moved too fast to be just obedient. He moved like someone who'd lived inside panic before. Sophie grabbed her jar of fireflies and her lucky red cap and dashed behind the counter. Liam followed, scanning the windows. The storm rolled in like an old grudge. Wind howled through cracks in the glass, and grains of sand beat against the windows like they were demanding to be let in. The sky turned the color of rust. Outside, the world disappeared behind a veil of dust and fury. Ethan drew the blinds, bolted the front door, and lit a small battery-powered lantern they kept under the sink. It glowed soft and amber, casting long shadows that felt almost like company. They huddled near the back room. The kitchen smelled of old grease and sun-baked lemons. The walls groaned, but the little diner held. Liam didn't speak. He sat with his arms around his knees, back pressed to the wall. Sophie sat beside him, holding out a tiny metal tin. "Want a caramel?" she whispered. He took one, nodded. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full like a blanket. A pause not of fear, but of mutual understanding. Here was a boy who didn't need to be asked what he was afraid of, and here was a girl who didn't need to know to be kind. The storm raged for hours. At one point, the power flickered out completely. Ethan moved through the dark like a ghost, lighting candles in old soda bottles. The flickering light turned the diner into a strange sort of church. Every table a pew, every cup and plate a relic. He brought out a thermos of cocoa and 3 chipped mugs. Sophie drank hers in loud slurps. Liam cupped his like it was something sacred. Ethan sat across from them and pulled out a worn playing card from his wallet. An old king of hearts, faded and creased. "He used to be a magician at parties," he said with a quiet smile. Sophie grinned. "Daddy dropped that in my cereal once." "It's good luck," Ethan said. He slid it across to Liam. "Keep it for now. Might come in handy." Liam stared at it, then tucked it gently into his pocket. Outside, the wind began to die. Not completely, but enough. Ethan unlatched the back door, just enough to see the storm lifting. The diner stood in a soft, strange silence, covered in sand like a buried treasure. Liam helped clear the tables without being asked. He moved slower now, a little more at home, a little less ready to run. Sophie handed him a towel and whispered, "Storms pass." "That's what Mama used to say." Liam blinked. "You remember her?" Sophie nodded. "I remember the way she smelled like peppermint tea, and how she made pancakes like they were magic." Liam didn't respond, but he dried the last glass with a little more care. Later that evening, they sat on the roof of the diner. Ethan had brought up 3 sandwiches and a bag of chips. The air was cooler now. The sky, 1,000 shades of lavender and gold. Liam looked out over the hills, his voice just above a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to get away." Ethan didn't move. He just let the words hang. "They kept me in a trailer," Liam said. "I ran when they were sleeping. I don't think they found me yet." Sophie reached over and touched his hand. "They won't." And in the stillness that followed, Liam looked like a boy again. Not a fugitive, not a victim, just a kid on a rooftop beneath a softening sky. That night, Ethan wrote another note on a torn napkin and tucked it in his wallet beneath the King of Hearts. Kindness is not wasted, not ever. In the coming days, life fell into a rhythm. Liam swept the porch each morning while Sophie fed a stray cat she named Butterscotch. Ethan cooked breakfast for the 3 of them, simple meals, but made with care. They played cards, fixed a busted jukebox, watched tumbleweeds chase one another down the road like old friends racing to catch up. The boy who had walked in with sunburned cheeks and cracked lips began to laugh. Not loudly, not often, but enough. Then one afternoon, Sophie brought out her treasure box. It was an old cigar tin filled with pebbles, bottle caps, and letters. Little notes her mom had written her before the end. She laid them out like gold coins. Liam stared, unsure. Sophie picked up one and read aloud, "To my starshine, when it's dark, that's just the sky making room for your light." Liam swallowed. She wrote those before she. Sophie nodded. "Every week. I don't read them all at once, just when I need to." Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them, a quiet ache in his chest, the kind that felt like both loss and healing. Later, when Liam thought no one was looking, he tore a page from Sophie's old notebook and wrote something of his own. He didn't say what it was, just folded it up and tucked it into the back of the cigar tin. He never spoke about it again. That night, under a quilt of desert stars, Ethan asked Liam if he wanted to call home again. Liam hesitated. "I did. A few nights ago." Ethan nodded. "She said she's coming," Liam whispered. But not with police. Not with anyone, she promised. Ethan's voice was steady. You trust her? Liam blinked. She's all I've got. Ethan looked at him, and something in the boy's voice felt like an echo of his own, back when he'd lost everything and only had Sophie's hand to hold. Well, Ethan said quietly. Then we wait. The next morning, the wind had changed again. It carried something different this time. Cooler, calmer. As if the desert was exhaling. Liam stood on the porch with the King of Hearts in one hand and the napkin in the other. When Ethan stepped out beside him, Liam looked up and said almost shyly, You ever think maybe people meet for a reason? Ethan smiled. Sometimes I think they meet because they need to. Liam looked out at the road. Dust rose in the distance, not fast, not angry, just steady. Sure, an SUV, dark and silent, rolled into view. The same one from his dreams. The same one he'd once feared. Only now it didn't feel like danger. It felt like the closing of a circle. Liam didn't move. He looked at Ethan, looked at Sophie, looked down at the King of Hearts, now smudged with oil and cocoa fingerprints. Then he whispered, She's here. The desert did not sleep. Even at night it hummed in low murmurs, the shuffle of wind over sand, the creak of a shutter, the occasional cough of an old engine refusing to die. Inside the diner, Ethan had left one burner glowing low, not for warmth, but for its company. The place felt less hollow with it lit, like the ghost of a hearth in a land that had forgotten fireplaces. Sophie lay curled on the cot behind the counter, wrapped in the quilt she'd carried since she was 3. A small hand poked out, fingers flexing in a dream. Ethan sat nearby with his back against the wall, legs stretched, coffee untouched in his hand. Across from him, the boy, now more boy than stranger, dozed lightly in the booth, head resting on his arm. They hadn't asked his name again, not after the silence that followed the first attempt. Instead, they shared quiet, the kind that filled a room without needing sound. That afternoon, the wind had changed. It rolled in first as a whisper, then a groan across the sand, blowing paper menus from their place and sending the sky into a dim rust. Storm, Ethan had said, standing in the doorway as though greeting an old enemy. Big one. Sophie had watched him, arms crossed, lips tight. The boy had flinched at the word storm, eyes darting to the horizon. He'd been tense all day, jumpy, glancing over his shoulder like someone was looking for him. Sophie had noticed but didn't press. She just offered him her half-eaten cookie, which he took with a nod that felt like the only safe word he had left. By sundown, the world had turned the color of blood and rust. Ethan locked the doors, taped the windows. He filled the kettle, lit the back stove, and brought out the old lantern just in case. It gets loud, he told them boys calm, like something's trying to tear the world in two. But it passes. Always does. Sophie sat close to the boy now, not touching, but near enough that her small presence felt like a thread holding him still. Want me read? She asked softly. He shrugged, eyes trained on nothing. She opened her worn-out storybook anyway, the one with water-stained corners and a loose spine. She read slowly, her voice steady and warm, like she was pouring tea into silence. Ethan listened too, though he'd heard the story 100 times. Tonight it felt different, like a ritual. Somehow, this was how you held a family together in a storm. The boy couldn't sleep. Hours passed. The storm beat the walls like angry hands. Sand hissed against the glass. He sat upright now, blanket tucked around him but hands clenched tight beneath it. Ethan, still in the booth across from him, noticed. He didn't speak, didn't move quickly, just reached into the pocket of his flannel and pulled out a matchbox. A single wooden match struck slow. The lantern bloomed. Sit closer, Ethan said. The boy moved cautiously, sliding into the booth opposite him again. Ethan set the lantern in the middle of the table. My wife used to light one of these when she couldn't sleep, Ethan said after a while. Said the flicker made her feel less alone. The boy looked at the flame, then at Ethan. Your wife died. Ethan nodded. Yeah, cancer. Took everything but our girl. The boy didn't ask more, but his eyes softened. After a while he whispered, They took me too. Not like her, but they took me. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't ask who they were. He just nodded again. A slow, deliberate nod that told the boy. I heard you. Outside the storm raged. Inside, a different kind of fire burned. Small, steady, human. They sat that way for a long time. The boy finally asked for water. Ethan poured it for him. His hand shook slightly. "Thank you," the boy said. It was the first time he'd used full words. Ethan met his eyes. "You're welcome." And that was it. Not a name, not a history, but a thread between them had been pulled tighter. The next morning, the sun rose like a shy child, peeking over the dunes as if afraid the storm might still be lurking. The town had vanished beneath a thick coat of sand. Cars buried, roads erased. Only the tallest signs stuck out, like survivors waving from a wreck. Ethan pushed the door open. Sand spilled in like water. He sighed. "It'll take a day to dig out. Maybe two." Sophie stood beside him, holding a broom too big for her hands. "We'll help." The boy joined them without a word, grabbing the second broom. Ethan watched as the two kids began sweeping in rhythm. For a moment, he didn't see a stranger beside Sophie. He saw her brother. Later, they sat on the diner roof, sipping soda from paper cups. The desert looked endless again, freshly drawn in long golden strokes. The boy had started to talk in fragments. "Lived near the sea once. Mom built things. Big things. Said they'd fly even without wings." Ethan turned to him slowly. "Your mom an engineer?" The boy shrugged. "Better. She's smart. All the way through." Sophie tilted her head. "Will she be looking for you?" The boy went quiet. Then, softly, he said, "If she's alive, yeah." It hurt Ethan to hear that if. "No one stopped looking for her," he said carefully. "She's probably saying the same about you right now." The boy looked down at his shoes. Then, almost too softly to hear, he said, "My name's Leo." Sophie beamed. "Hi, Leo." He nodded once, then leaned back and looked at the sky. That night, Leo asked if he could make a call. "There's a number," he said. "If I say a code word, they'll know I'm safe." Ethan hesitated only a moment. Then he handed over the ancient cordless from behind the counter. Leo dialed with shaking fingers. 1 ring, 2. Then he whispered the code into the line. "Telefalcon, nest is safe." He hung up before anyone could respond. The next afternoon, the black SUV appeared like a mirage. It didn't roar up. It glided, quiet, sure. Sophie stood frozen, gripping Leo's hand. He didn't pull away. A woman stepped out, tall, poised, hair tied back, but her eyes gave her away. They scanned the diner like it held her whole world. Then they landed on Leo. "Mom," he said. Elise didn't run. She walked, like her heart would shatter if she hurried. When she reached him, Leo dropped everything and ran into her arms. She knelt, held him so tightly it looked like she'd never let go again. Ethan stood at the edge of the lot, hands in his pockets. He didn't know what to do with the space in his chest. Then Elise looked up. She met his eyes. She walked to him slowly, Leo's hand in hers. "You're the one who fed my son," she said. Ethan gave a small nod. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked at her, then really looked. She wasn't what he expected, not sharp-edged or hardened by wealth. She looked like someone who had cried herself sick for weeks. "You raised a good one," Ethan said quietly. Elise's eyes welled. He was lost. You found him. They stood in the desert light, dust curling around their feet. Leo tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Can I come back?" he asked. "Sophie and I were going to finish the story." Ethan smiled. "Anytime, kid." That night, the diner felt both emptier and more whole. Sophie sat at the counter, a letter clutched in her hand. It was from Leo. He'd written it in the SUV before they drove off. "Sophie, you made me feel not alone. Thank you for letting me be your maybe brother. I hope I see you soon. Leo." She folded it, tucked it into her storybook. Ethan watched her, and in the quiet, with the storm gone and the fire low, he felt something settle. Not the end, but something whole. The boy came back in winter. Not a boy anymore. Snow dusted the old diner sign, soft as powdered sugar. The kind that settles into corners and memories. The kind that hushes a town like a secret. Ethan hadn't changed much. His hair grayer, the lines around his eyes deeper maybe. But when he opened the front door and heard the familiar jingle of the bell, he looked up the same way he always had, like hope might walk through. And it had, tall now, and wearing a charcoal coat lined with desert warmth. Liam stepped in from the cold. His shoes left wet marks on the tile, and his breath curled like steam. But he smiled that same sideways smile, the one Ethan had first seen beneath sand-drenched glass. Tired, cautious, grateful. Thought you were just a memory, Ethan said, voice like flannel. I was, Liam replied, stepping forward. I found my way back. They didn't hug right away. They just stood there, two men staring at a long, quiet distance and letting it slowly close. Then Ethan opened his arms and Liam leaned in, and they held on like the world had been too loud, too long, without this. In the corner booth, Sophie had set two mugs down before either of them had spoken. She was grown now, 19, with her mother's calm and her father's eyes. She offered a lopsided grin. Still like cocoa? She asked. Liam sat down slowly. Still the best I've had. Steam curled between them, thick and sweet. The diner hadn't changed. Same flickering neon. Same old jukebox in the corner. Same sugar shakers with crusted lids. Only the memories had deepened, worn into the wood. Liam pulled something from his coat pocket. The King of Hearts. Laminated now, worn from time, but still the same. I've kept it all these years, he said. It reminds me who I was and who I became. Ethan took it gently, like handling a piece of firelight. You always had something good in you. Just needed a place to land. Liam's voice lowered. I want to show you something. Outside, a black SUV idled in the parking lot. But it wasn't ominous now. It was just waiting, like everything else had been. They drove in silence, through the sleepy town dusted with frost, past the hills where the sand once howled, past the road where Liam had first been found, then glass, steel, and light. A low, modern building at the edge of the horizon. Its architecture soft, organic, like someone had taught glass how to breathe. This is yours, Ethan asked quietly. Ours, Liam corrected. You and Sophie gave me the first second chance I ever had. This is just what I built with it. Inside, the building hummed with quiet energy. Not cold, not corporate, but calm. Each room felt like it had been designed with silence in mind. Soft lights, open air, spaces for breath. Liam led them down a hallway to a glass room filled with drawings. Children's designs, hopes letters. A mural covered one wall. A desert diner, wind-blown and warm, painted in hues of sand and firelight. We call it Haven, Liam said. It's a place for kids who've lost their footing. Kind of like I did. They get warmth, food, time, quiet, and people who listen. Ethan looked around, blinking harder now. His voice caught. It's beautiful. It's what you gave me, Liam said. I just returned it forward. They walked past shelves lined with boxes, each labeled with a name, a date, and a tiny symbol. In one of them sat a red bottle cap. In another, a King of Hearts. Rituals, Ethan thought. Small anchors in a drifting world. Liam paused beside a small glass case near the front door. Inside it, laminated and sealed, was a napkin with faded handwriting. Kindness is not wasted. Not ever. Sophie gasped softly. You kept it. Liam nodded. It's our creed now. Every kid here sees it first. Snow began to fall outside, soft and slow. The sky a quilt of gray. That evening, they returned to the diner. The old jukebox crackled to life, playing an old jazz tune that nobody remembered the name of, but everyone knew by heart. Sophie brought out a new batch of caramel squares. Made them like Mama's recipe, she said, sliding one to Liam. He unwrapped it, smiling. The three of them sat in the booth again. No fanfare, no lights. Just quiet, just belonging. And then Liam pulled out a small envelope. Inside, a letter, handwritten. He didn't read it aloud. He just slid it to Ethan. Ethan opened it with weathered fingers. It was simple. It said, For every morning you fed me. For every time you didn't ask why. For the silence that healed. For the cocoa. For the card. For the name you let me keep. You saved more than a boy. You saved a future. Ethan folded it slowly, placed it beside his heart. Liam whispered, You gave me a booth and a sandwich. I'm trying to give the world back. That night, as wind curled around the corners of the old diner and the stars blinked awake one by one, Sophie brought out the firefly jar. The same one, still faintly glowing, years later, though maybe just with memory now. They lit a single candle on the counter. No reason, just because Because sometimes the world is too dark not to. And they sat there, father, daughter, and boy-turned-man, in the hum of a neon-soaked night, not talking much. Just holding the kind of silence that only found families know. The snow fell outside. Slow. Sure. Forgiving. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.